A number of people have written me since my book Grounded Spirituality came out, to tell me that, my emphasis on the dangers and perils associated with what I call the New Cage movement or patriarchal spirituality, those teachings, that my emphasis on that and the calling out of that and the looking deeply at that is not spiritual, which is obviously preposterous, but also that it's frivolous and needless. It's not necessary. And I just want to say something quickly about that. It's been my experience that this conversation is utterly essential, both for protection of individuals who are at risk of being led to slaughter by ungrounded spiritual teachings and new cage practices. But it's also essential for our species going forward, because if we keep adhering to participating in spiritual teachings that are dissociative, that are simplistic and superficial, that lead people away from the self and claim that the most awakened or enlightened or realized state exists independent of the self, independent of their story, independent of their feelings, independent of their bodies, that all their personal identifications are false, that all they need to do is transcend them or to witness them, and that somehow witnessing your stuff will somehow transform it. Let's just get real together and understand that every single person on this planet is a trauma survivor to varying degrees. And it may well be true that fragmented, dissociative, detachment-oriented spiritualities are helpful to a point. But at the end of the day, detachment is a tool. It's not a life. And a friend of mine on Facebook hung herself. She had bought into these ideas, fired her therapist, and her stuff just kept arising in the middle of the night until she just couldn't be here anymore. And since starting to write about that in 2013, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have written me about people they've known who bought into these spiritualities and who left us by their own hand. So it's quite serious. And it's also serious because the more that we adhere to these vertical notions of spirituality, transcendent notions of spirituality, those that are disconnected from the human experience and that don't see spirituality and humanness as the same thing, and I do, the more likely we are to not notice what's happening to our species and to our planet, looking up for all of our answers, being lost inside of pondering of our own navel, trying to find enlightenment alone in isolation in a meditation cave. We don't notice that the world is burning. We don't notice the suffering that's happening to people around us because we're so busy disconnecting from our own suffering. So I think it's essential that we have these conversations and that we go deeply into the question of what are these spiritual teachings, all of them, particularly mainstream teachings, because those are an industry, and ask the very simple and straightforward question. Is this teaching honest? Is it legitimate? Does it serve humanity? What is the core? What is at the core of it? A lot of times, a lot of these teachers will use very gentle and subtle practices and they're helpful practices. But really, where they're leading you and what their core belief is that our humanness is not part of the spiritual field, and that our personal identifications are false, that our feelings aren't real, that our bodies don't matter, and that the self is not to be honored, it's to be transcended. Those are the kind of teachings that end up destroying people's lives, because trauma survivors need something that integrates them. They don't need something that fragments them and dissociates them further. So I encourage you to ask the question on a very, very deep level when you're exposed to any kind of a so-called spiritual teaching. Does it serve you? Does it serve you for a while? Does it serve you for longer than that? What are they really saying? Where are they really leading you? What is the direction this teacher is taking us? And what is motivating this teacher within their own unresolved personal history? These are questions that need to be asked, because if we don't find a grounded, integrated, inclusive, human honoring, relational spirituality pretty soon, we're lost.